That morning began the way most mornings do in our house. I was standing at the kitchen sink, holding a mug of tea that had already gone cold. The window above the sink was fogged from the dishwasher. Outside, a light rain tapped against the glass. Slow, steady, nothing unusual. At the table, my son leaned toward my wife and said, "Mom, eat this bowl. I made it just for you." His voice was gentle, careful. Then I saw him move his hand. It was a small movement, so small most people would have missed it. His fingers hovered over her oatmeal for half a second. Something slipped from his hand. He straightened up as if nothing had happened. I didn't shout. I didn't rush across the room. I simply watched. When my daughter-in-law stepped away to grab napkins, I walked to the table, lifted both bowls, and switched them, quietly. No sound except the faint scrape of ceramic on wood. Then I returned to the sink and took a sip of cold tea. No one noticed. At least that's what they believed. Before I go any further, if you're listening, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I always find it grounding to know where these stories land. Now let me take you back fully to that morning. My wife, Margaret, had been getting weaker for months, not in a dramatic way, just a steady thinning. She ate less, spoke less. Sometimes she would pause mid-sentence, as if searching for something that used to come easily. Our son Daniel and his wife Lisa moved in 4 months earlier. They said they wanted to help, said the house was too big for 2 people our age. Margaret smiled when Daniel suggested it. That smile mattered to me, so I agreed. At first, everything looked thoughtful. Lisa organized Margaret's medications, rearranged the pantry, scheduled new appointments with different specialists. Daniel started showing unusual interest in breakfast, which had never been his habit growing up. He stood by Lisa's chair every morning, one hand resting near her shoulder, not touching, just close enough to appear protective. I noticed things. Margaret often felt dizzy after breakfast, not every day, just often enough. Whenever I offered to prepare her meals myself, Lisa would step in gently. "You should rest, Frank," she'd say. "I've got it." She always smiled when she said it. That morning, when Daniel leaned forward and made that tiny movement over Margaret's bowl, something inside me became very still. Not angry, not afraid, just still. I didn't know exactly what he dropped into the oatmeal. I only knew it didn't belong there. After I switched the bowls, breakfast continued. Margaret ate slowly as usual. Lisa ate more than she normally did. She talked about a follow-up appointment. Her tone was light, almost rehearsed. Daniel barely touched his food. His eyes kept drifting toward Lisa. I put my cup down and folded my hands on the counter. Then I waited. I didn't rush anything after that. That's one thing age teaches you. If you move too quickly, you only reveal what you know. If you wait, other people reveal themselves. Breakfast ended the way it always did. Plates stacked, dishwasher humming. Lisa wiped the table carefully, making sure there were no crumbs left behind. Daniel stepped out to the garage, saying he wanted to check something in the car. Margaret moved slowly toward the living room. I walked beside her but didn't hold her arm. She doesn't like being steadied unless she asks. The rain kept falling, soft against the roof. About 20 minutes later, I heard it. A chair shifting sharply in the kitchen. Then footsteps. Fast, I stayed where I was. Lisa's voice came first, strained. "Daniel, something's not right." I could hear her breathing change. Shorter, uneven. Daniel's voice dropped low, almost urgent. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It tastes different. There's something bitter." I looked at Margaret. She looked back at me. She hadn't eaten much, maybe 3 small spoonfuls. That had become her habit lately. I walked back into the kitchen at a normal pace. Lisa was gripping the edge of the table. Her face had lost color. Daniel stood close to her, not touching this time. He looked at me. For the first time that morning, there was no softness in his expression. "Dad," he said, "does something seem wrong to you?" I set my hands on the back of a chair. "You should ask your wife," I told him. My voice sounded steady, even to me. Lisa tried to sit down again, but she misjudged the distance slightly and had to grab the chair to guide herself. A thin layer of sweat had formed across her forehead. Margaret started to stand, alarm in her eyes, but I raised my hand slightly. "Sit," I said gently. She trusted me enough to do that. Daniel hesitated. His gaze moved from Lisa to the bowl on the table, then to me. Something in his face shifted. Not concern, calculation. Lisa's breathing became sharper. She lifted her hand to her throat as if testing her pulse. "You told me there wouldn't be a smell," she said suddenly. The room grew quiet. Daniel stiffened. "What are you talking about?" he asked. But he didn't sound confused. He sounded cornered. Lisa let out a short, unsteady laugh. "You said it would blend in, that no one would notice." Margaret looked at me again. I closed the kitchen door, not loudly, just enough for the latch to click. Then I walked back to the table and pulled out a chair. "We're going to sit," I said, "and we're going to talk." Daniel stared at me differently now, not like a son looking at his father, more like someone reassessing a situation he thought he controlled. Lisa sank into the chair. Her hands were trembling. On the table, the oatmeal had already begun to cool, a thin skin forming on the surface. I reached into my jacket and placed a folder in the center of the table. I had prepared it weeks ago. Then I waited for someone to speak first. No one reached for the folder. That told me enough. Daniel's eyes stayed on me. Lisa kept staring at the table as if the wood grain might rearrange itself into an exit. Margaret sat quietly near the doorway. She didn't speak, but she didn't look confused either. That mattered to me. I opened the folder myself. Inside were copies, not originals. I learned long ago, you never bring originals into a room like this. Bank statements, insurance forms, a printout of a policy amendment dated 6 weeks earlier. $3 million. Margaret listed as the insured. Daniel and Lisa listed as primary beneficiaries. Margaret's signature was there. Shaky. Real. But the date didn't match any appointment I had driven her to. I slid the policy across the table. Daniel swallowed. "It was just planning," he said. "That's normal." "It is," I agreed. "Planning is normal." Silence again. Then I placed the next document down. Credit card statements, large withdrawals, repeated, structured, not random. "I may be retired," I said calmly, "but I still know how to read patterns." Lisa's breathing was uneven now, but she wasn't collapsing. That told me something else. Daniel finally pulled out a chair and sat down. His shoulders dropped slightly, not defeated, just recalculating. "You don't understand the pressure," he said. "The debts, they don't wait." "I understand numbers," I replied. "Pressure doesn't rewrite ethics." No anger, just fact. Then I placed a small device on the table. Daniel recognized it immediately. The dash camera. He used to brag about it, said it captured clear audio. He never changed the default password. I didn't need to play the whole thing. I tapped once, fast-forwarded to the part I had already marked. Lisa's voice filled the kitchen. "Is that dosage enough?" A pause, Daniel's voice. "If nothing changes, we adjust it." I turned the device off. The rain had stopped outside. The house felt very quiet. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Steady. Lisa finally looked up at me directly. "You switched the bowls," she said. "Yes." Daniel exhaled slowly, as if a weight he had been balancing was finally set down. "You were testing us," he said. "No," I answered. "I was confirming." "There's a difference." I leaned back slightly and folded my hands. "When people show you a pattern," I continued, "you don't interrupt it. You let it complete itself." Lisa's hands stopped shaking. Not because she felt better, because she understood. Daniel looked smaller now, not physically, just in presence. He stared at the insurance policy. "It wasn't supposed to escalate," he said quietly. "But it did," I replied. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why. Instead, I stood up and walked to the small cabinet near the hallway. Inside was a locked drawer. I unlocked it and returned with another envelope. This one had already been addressed. I placed it beside the folder. Step 1, I said calmly. I confirmed what I saw. Step 2, I documented everything. Step 3, I made sure someone else would see it if I didn't act. Neither of them asked who. They didn't need to. Then I sat back down, and I waited. Daniel looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Lisa did. Her fingers hovered over it for a moment, then pulled back as if it might be warm. "Who else knows?" she asked. Her voice was steadier now, not because she felt safe, because she understood the structure forming around her. "I believe in process," I said. "Process removes emotion from decisions." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Dad, we can fix this." "Fixing," I replied gently, "requires truth first." Margaret stood up slowly and walked to my side. She placed her hand on the table. Not trembling, not weak, just present. Lisa looked at her, and something in her face changed. Not guilt, something closer to recognition. I continued calmly. "When you changed her doctors, I noted it. When appointments were postponed, I noted it. When her symptoms appeared after specific meals, I noted it." I tapped the folder. "I don't guess. I compare." Daniel rubbed his forehead. His composure was thinning. "You're making this bigger than it is." "No," I said. "You already did." Silence again. The oatmeal bowls still sat untouched on the table. Steam long gone. Surface hardened. Lisa shifted in her chair. The discomfort she felt earlier was fading. That was expected. Whatever they had been experimenting with wasn't immediate. It was incremental. That told me even more. "I didn't bring authorities here to embarrass you," I said. "I brought them because documentation has already begun elsewhere." Daniel's head snapped up. "You called someone?" "I don't act without structure." Lisa closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked directly at Margaret. "How much did you hear?" she asked her. Margaret answered quietly. "Enough." There was no anger in her tone. That seemed to unsettle them more than shouting would have. Daniel stood up suddenly and paced once across the kitchen, then stopped himself, sat back down. "Okay," he said. "We were desperate. That's the truth." "Desperation," I replied, "does not grant permission." I opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, correspondence with an attorney, a financial advisor, dates and timestamps. I slid one page forward. "Your credit restructuring request was denied 3 months ago," I said to Daniel. "You didn't tell me." He looked down. Lisa spoke instead. "We thought we could manage it." "With what?" I asked. Neither answered. I folded my hands again. "This is where clarity begins," I said. "Not punishment, clarity." Then I laid out the steps plainly. First, Margaret's care returns to physicians of her choosing. Second, no one prepares her food except her or me. Third, all financial access is revoked immediately. Fourth, the documentation already submitted proceeds. Daniel's face drained of color at that last one. "You can stop it," he said quickly. "No," I answered. "I cannot." That wasn't entirely true, but it was necessary. Lisa's composure cracked slightly. "You're going to ruin us." "No," I said again. "You already positioned yourselves at risk. I'm simply declining to shield you." Margaret squeezed my arm gently. Outside, a car door closed somewhere on the street, normal life continuing. Inside, the structure was complete. Daniel looked at me one more time, searching for a softer version of his father. He didn't find one. Then there was a knock at the front door. Measured, calm. I stood, and I walked to answer it. I opened the front door without hesitation. 2 officers stood on the porch, not rushed, not aggressive, just steady. I had spoken with one of them 2 days earlier, quietly, hypothetically, at first. "Good morning," the taller one said. "Thank you for coming," I replied. I stepped aside. Daniel's footsteps sounded behind me, quick, uneven. Lisa remained seated at the kitchen table. Margaret stayed beside her chair, one hand resting lightly on the wood. The officers entered the kitchen and paused. They didn't speak immediately. They observed the folder on the table, the dash camera, the untouched bowls. Daniel tried to regain control of his voice. "Dad, This isn't necessary. I closed the kitchen door again. Same soft click as before. This is exactly what's necessary, I said. One of the officers asked calmly, "Is everyone safe at the moment?" "Yes," I answered. "For now." Margaret met the officer's eyes and gave a small nod. That was enough. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "You're treating us like criminals." "I'm treating this like documentation," I replied. Lisa finally stood up. Slowly, carefully. The earlier discomfort had passed almost completely. She looked embarrassed by that. "I want to explain," she said. "You will," I told her. "Clearly." The officers didn't interrupt. They didn't rush. They simply allowed space. Lisa drew in a breath. "It started with debt," she said. "It spiraled. We thought we could control it. Just small adjustments. Nothing drastic." "Small adjustments," I repeated. "Involving dosage." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "No one intended immediate harm," he said. "It was supposed to be gradual." Margaret inhaled softly at that. I did not. "Intent does not cancel action," I said evenly. The taller officer asked, "Were substances administered without medical approval?" Lisa hesitated. Daniel answered, "Yes." The word hung there, clear, unavoidable. I didn't look at them when he said it. I looked at Margaret. Her expression was not shock, it was confirmation. I reached for the dash camera and handed it to the officer. "There's audio," I said, time-stamped. He accepted it without comment. Lisa's composure thinned. "We can fix this," she repeated. "We can cooperate." "You will cooperate," I said. "That's the only direction left." Daniel stepped toward me slightly. "Dad, please." I held his gaze. "You had opportunities," I said quietly. "You used them to calculate." The officers began their procedure. Calm questions, notes, requests for identification, no raised voices, no dramatic movements, just process. Lisa sat back down slowly as she answered questions. Daniel followed instructions. His earlier posture of control was gone. In its place was something smaller, not yet remorse, more like the realization of consequence. Margaret stayed beside me the entire time. She didn't cry. She didn't speak unless asked. When one of the officers gently asked if she needed medical evaluation, she answered clearly, "Yes, with my physician." Not the ones Lisa had chosen, mine. The officers nodded. The room felt orderly again, not peaceful, but orderly. As Daniel was asked to step outside for further discussion, he turned once more. "You're choosing strangers over your own son," he said. I shook my head slowly. "I'm choosing structure over chaos." He had no response to that. When the front door closed behind them, the house became very quiet. Margaret exhaled. I put the phone face down on the table. Then I waited. The house stayed quiet long after the patrol car pulled away. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea. This one was warm. Steam rose slowly, steady. She didn't drink it right away, she just held it. I began clearing the table. The oatmeal went into the sink. I rinsed the bowls carefully, watching the thin layer break apart under the water. No one spoke for a while. Later that afternoon, I drove Margaret to her longtime physician. Not the specialist Lisa had recommended, the doctor who had known her for 20 years. I handed him the folder. Not emotionally, just methodically. He read through the policy copies, the appointment changes, the medication list Lisa had adjusted, the timestamps from the dash camera. He didn't react outwardly. He simply said, "We'll run full labs." That was enough. 2 days later, the results confirmed what I had already suspected. Mild but consistent levels of a sedative compound, not lethal, not dramatic, but enough to weaken someone gradually. Enough to blur symptoms into something that looked like aging. The physician documented everything, signed it, forwarded it to the appropriate department. I didn't need to call anyone else. The process was already moving. Daniel and Lisa were released that evening pending formal charges: structured fraud, medical endangerment, insurance conspiracy. Serious words, but not dramatic ones. Daniel called once. I let it ring. Then I turned the phone face down again. Margaret's strength began returning slowly. It wasn't immediate. There was no sudden transformation, just steadiness replacing decline. She started finishing her breakfast again. She asked to water the plants. Small signs. One evening as we sat in the living room, she said, "You knew for a while, didn't you?" "Yes," I answered. "Why didn't you confront them sooner?" I considered that. "Because when people are building something dishonest," I said, "they reveal more if you let them finish." She nodded. That made sense to her. The attorney called next. Calm voice. Clear outline of next steps. Evidence submission. Insurance notification. Asset freeze on any attempted claim. Numbers, dates, procedures, no chaos. Daniel requested a meeting. I agreed to one condition. It would be in the attorney's office, recorded. He looked different when he walked in, smaller somehow, not physically, just stripped of assumption. "I never meant to hurt her," he said. I believed that. "You meant to benefit from harm," I replied. He didn't argue. Lisa did most of the explaining. She detailed the debt, the business failure Daniel had hidden, the credit lines exhausted. None of it surprised me. "I would have helped," I said. Daniel looked up sharply. "I know," he answered. That was the tragedy in it. The charges proceeded, reduced in exchange for cooperation and repayment agreements. Court supervision, financial restrictions, mandatory counseling, consequences. Not destruction. Margaret chose not to attend the hearings. "I don't need to see it," she said. "I just need it to end." And it did. Not with noise, not with spectacle, just paperwork closing. One afternoon, after everything had settled into its new shape, Margaret placed her hand over mine at the table. "We can't stay here," she said. She wasn't speaking emotionally. She was speaking clearly. I nodded. I had already begun looking at listings by the coast. Then I waited for the right day to begin packing. We didn't rush the move. Margaret and I went room by room, slowly. We decided what carried memory and what carried weight. Those are not always the same things. The house felt different once everything was resolved. Not haunted. Just finished. I boxed the files from my study last. I kept copies of the documents organized in a simple binder, not because I wanted to revisit them, because I believe in records. Margaret packed her tea set herself, each cup wrapped carefully in newspaper. Her hands were steadier now. The day we left, I walked through the kitchen one final time. The table had been cleared. The window above the sink was clean. No fog this time. I stood there for a moment, not angry, not triumphant, just aware. Some homes hold comfort, some hold lessons. We moved to a smaller place near the water, nothing elaborate. 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony that catches the morning sun. The first morning there, Margaret brewed mint tea. The scent filled the kitchen. No oatmeal, no tension, just quiet routine. I opened the window and listened to the waves, slow, predictable, steady. Margaret joined me at the table. "I feel like myself again," she said. That was enough. In the months that followed, we quietly helped establish a small support program through our church community. Nothing public, just guidance for older couples who needed someone to look at paperwork with them, someone who understood patterns. I don't advertise it, but occasionally someone calls. Last week, a man about my age left a message. He said his daughter had suddenly taken control of his accounts. He wasn't sure why. I told him to bring copies, all of them. Then I waited. Life is quieter now. I clean the balcony every Sunday morning. Margaret waters the small plants we brought from the old house. We eat breakfast together. Simple food, simple trust. Family, I've learned, is not defined by proximity or obligation. It's defined by protection, and protection sometimes requires calm action. If you stayed with me until this moment, thank you for listening. If this story gave you something to think about, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And in the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Two of our most popular family stories will appear on your screen next. You might find something meaningful in them too. Take care of yourself, and take care of the quiet details.